I understand you're from a FinTech background, you're an IITian, and one fine day you suddenly decided to start a company called Sutradhar. And I just wanted to understand that what does this company do?
Tell our future generations about the stories that we have grown up with. I am literally the generation gap between somebody reading growing up with Shiv Puran and now growing up with Peppa Pig.
What's the purpose of trying to tell them our stories?
Aping what somebody else is doing, if we tell them our stories, it would be much more relatable. Chekhov or Shakespeare, we say that their stories are timeless. Why these stories are timeless? Because the center of those stories is emotions. So I keep telling people that Duryodhan is a personification of jealousy, greed. Karna is a personification of ego. Yudhishthir does a good thing, he regrets it. But when a Duryodhan does a bad thing, he doesn't feel guilty about it.
What would you respond to someone who comes from any generation and says that, oh, this is mythology, why should I believe in it?
Mythology is just a word borrowed from a language which is not ours. Many times you would see people using Lord. And I joke about it that Hanuman ji to Bhagwan and Lord to Mountbatten bhi the. In Spider-Man, there is this famous, with more power comes more responsibility. That is here also.
I am somehow more excited for Halloween than for Dasera.
The content on Dashera is very small in quantity and bad in quality compared to the content available about Halloween. What is different about Sisters' Day and Raksha Bandhan? Raksha Bandhan is a much better way of celebrating Sisters' Day, right? But because there is massive weight, like Archie's and Hallmark, when they came to India, they wanted to sell their greeting cards. But they had no greeting cards for Raksha Bandhan, Holi and Diwali. So they said, okay, let's make Father's Day, Valentine's Day popular. Can I make a typical American kid fight with his father or her father that Papa, aaj hum Dashera manayenge? If you kill these things, who will you go to tomorrow? Tell me any other way when you socially interact with your neighbors. None. So this is basically the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where the war between Gaurav and Pandav soldiers was fought. And these are all the various events of the battle which happened during the Kurukshetra war. So these are the player tokens. So each player represents one of the armies that fought in the war. And these are the allies of Kauravas. These are all the allies of Pandavas. So if you are, by the way, Hastinapur, you get the first chance. So why Hastinapur gets the first chance? Because Pandavas started the war playing on the defensive. They never were aggressor.
They never attacked first.
Aggressors were the Kauravas. So that is why Hastinapur gets the first chance. So if you look at it, the leading kingdoms on both sides, so Panchal was on one side, the Hastinapur was on the other side, and all others were rallying around these kingdoms, their diplomatic relations or their family relations. So you throw the dice.
Namaste and welcome to the show, Gaurav ji. Thank you for being here. I understand you're from a FinTech background, you're an IITian, and one fine day you suddenly decided to start a company called Sutradhar, which has got nothing to do with your financial and your expertise in tech. And I just wanted to understand that what does this company do?
So basically we are trying to... The motive behind creating Sutradhar was to tell our future generations about the stories that we have grown up with. And this thing actually triggered with a very simple, small incident. It was my daughter's 3rd birthday, and my parents, who live in Kanpur, they were visiting Mumbai. And my mother was reading Shiv Puran. My father was reading a book that I had bought for my daughter, Panchatantra. And my daughter was watching Panchatantra. Was Peppa Pig. And me sitting between them, I was thinking, okay, I am literally the generation gap between somebody reading growing up with Shiv Puran and now growing up with Peppa Pig. And I thought more on it. And I realized that when we were growing up, we lived in a joint family environment where there were multiple people living in the single house and multiple people of different generations, right? I had kids of my own age, my cousins, I had grandparents, I had people of my parents' age, my uncles, aunts, who were all living in the same house. And We grew up with stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and all these Puranic stories. And my aunt used to be the person in my my home. But our children are growing up in a nuclear family environment where they don't live with their grandparents, they don't have any cousins to live. In fact, most of the urban families have a single child. They don't even have a brother or sister to live with. This child is lonely. And parents are also busy. They both are going through their jobs or their daily routine. They don't have time to spend with the child. This leaves the child with having nothing to do when the child is indoor. What the child does, he relies on television and mobile phones. So we as a parent, we scream and shout at them for using too much mobile phone, but we are not giving them an alternative. So it came from that thought that, okay, so if my daughter is relying on TV, what all is there available on internet that she can consume and she can watch and then
and learn from.
And that is where they are learning from, right? Because we are not spending enough time with them. We are not teaching them anything, essentially. And we are failing as a parent, to be honest. But you can say it's all the necessity of urban life. You can't say that earning money is also equally important, right?
Absolutely.
But the problem is there. Everybody acknowledges it. But what would be the solution? So we decided that, okay, so if I can't introduce these stories, I personally I can, but not everybody can. The problem I was trying to solve was for us as a society as a whole, where the children could grow up with the similar or same stories that we have grown up with, because these stories were used to teach us moral values and lessons. Who is teaching moral values to our children today? I don't think so that anyone is. And it is very important. So you mentioned FinTech. And my thought was that, okay, if let's say, if nobody had built UPI, was I not buying products in the market? Was I not transacting? I was, right?
Correct.
But if my society degrades morally, is there any recourse to that? Is there any alternative to that? Right? UPI, I have an alternative, I can pay cash. But if my children are morally degraded,
there's no coming back.
What would I do as a parent? I would have no face left, right? I would have nowhere to go. So I thought that this is probably a much bigger thing to address. And FinTech, there were a lot of smart brains doing something, right? In this, nobody was doing anything. And this also is not only just a business venture, because this has a lot of consequences on the society. As I mentioned, the moral education part. Somebody who is responsible enough and who understands these nuances would be the right person to build something like this. Because in the wrong hands, this can be a weapon also, right? People distort these stories, they tell the different narratives, and which is what has been going on. So I thought maybe I should do it. And that was the genesis point for bringing these same stories that I grew up with. And then things evolved, right?
What does the company Sutradhar do?
So we basically are trying to recreate or repackage our stories from our epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata, various Puranic literature, even Panchatantra, in the mediums where our children spend their time on, right? We have created short videos for like mobile devices. We have created puzzles where they can basically spend some time off the screen and solve those puzzles. We have created games. This is one of those games that we have created, which basically is intended towards invoking curiosity among their minds to know more about these stories. Because when we were growing up, those storytelling sessions with our grandparents used to be the highlight of the day. We used to look forward for those sessions. Today, that is not the case. Today, they have so many avenues to access this entertainment bit of the
reels,
content.
etc.,
Exactly.
all those things.
So what would make them excited about these stories? That also is a challenge that you need to address. So that is where this gamification of these stories came to in my mind. That, okay, can we make interesting games out of it, which they will play, and then they would be curious about knowing more about this stuff. And then they can go to the app or maybe our website or maybe buy books.
So as I understand from what you're saying about Sutradhar is that it's a company based on storytelling, if I may, the importance of storytelling, especially our own civilizational and cultural stories. And these stories are now being repackaged into games. They're there on your apps. Videos are there on these apps, and the game is like an interface or like a hook to try and get whomsoever is playing the game interested in our epic stories.
Correct.
Am I right in that?
Correct.
All right.
And the reason we did this was because I keep telling a lot of stories to my daughter while she was growing up. And one of the things is that when you tell them a story, they have to have the ability to visualize them, right? To imagine the character, imagine the setting. That makes it more interesting to them. So if I tell my daughter about Hulk, it's easy for her to imagine, right? Because she has seen
Iron
the
Man.
character, or Iron Man, or any of those. It's like my 2-year-old son, he is very excited about Spider-Man because he has seen so many videos, he has seen so many posters, books, comic books, etc. Or you go to the shop, you have seen these action figures. But when I tell them about Bhim, they can't visualize Bhim. When I tell them Jamwant, they don't know how Jamwant
Or
looks like.
Ghatotkach.
Ghatotkach,
I guess
right?
barely nobody knows about Ghatotkach.
Correct. So they are not able to visualize. And with the lack of that becomes a handicap in them enjoying those stories, right? So these visual elements also help introduce them to the elements of the stories, which can help them visualize how this scene would look like, right? How this scene would play out when what I am telling them. So we have also created character cards, by the way. So based on the characters of Mahabharata. So if you are telling a story, you can use those character cards as an accompaniment with the storytelling. Okay, this is Bhim, right? Okay, this is Ghatotkach. This is these characters, and the kid can then start imagining on their own.
But a question here that comes to my mind is that why do we need to teach them these stories? Why can't they just be happy listening to Spider-Man and Iron Man and all that? What's the purpose of trying to tell them our stories?
So there are two important purposes for this. One is that when we are telling these stories, they are culturally our stories. Because when somebody is creating a story, they create those stories from their culture, their environment, right? Which is probably appropriate for that environment, probably resonates with that environment, but may not necessarily fit for our environment. And instead of just aping what somebody else is doing, if we tell them our stories, it would be much more relatable. So if I, let's say, pick up an example from, let's say, recent OTTs that we are seeing. So there is a series called Panchayat. It did very well.
Very well,
right? There is a recent series called Mamla Legal Hai. It is about Indian legal system, and it did very decently well. Now imagine if somebody wanted to create a Mamla Legal Hai or a Panchayat and picked up some Western show and just copied it. Like if you pick up, let's say, some show from
like Suits or something like that.
Suits. Let's say you copy Suits. India doesn't see those kind of lawyers or law, right? In India, courtroom looks very different. And if you are watching them, you won't find it relatable.
You want to relate, yeah.
And it would be like everybody would say, boss, ye copy paste kyun dikha rahe ho hame? I don't want it. So it is very important for us to create, because otherwise we are not living in a cocoon, right? We will have to go out of the office, out of the house. And when we go out in the street, the world should reflect what I see in the TV. It shouldn't be completely different, alien world, right? That is why it is important for our stories to find the connect that we have around us. And the second part is that most of the stories, the objective of these stories that you mentioned is to make big bucks, make money out of them, right? They are pure business ventures. They are not designed to educate people or to teach them moral values or lessons, or designed towards creating good for the society. That is not the job Hollywood has taken on them, right? But that is a job somebody has to do. And these stories also play out in that fashion as well.
You mean to say that, stories like, Snow White, fairy tales like that, Disney, etc., that they've created are more about, entertainment, I would say, rather than edutainment. Whereas you're trying to say that our epics are more civilizational, and maybe one of the reasons why our nation is still strong, our civilization is still existent and thriving. It's the only civilization that has come
Correct.
from the past and is still existing, is because of the moral values that these stories have imparted to our generations from time to time. Is that what you're getting at?
It's one of the reasons, yes. Because the thing is that these stories play a very important role as a thread that ties the past to the present, right? And that is, by the way, one of the thread is sutra, right? So this thread that ties from the stories, because these stories are immortal. We, as every generation, we go away and our next generation takes over. But these stories get passed on through generations. And they carry a memory. They carry a civilizational memory in them, right? The way we see our characters, the way we define our actions, the way we justify their actions or inactions in certain situations, they carry the tales of those times. So like Mahabharata, for example, has been rewritten or retold multiple times across every generations. And if you look at the interpretations that have been picked up at different generations, they will also tell you the times those stories have been picked up in. Right? So if in certain variations Karna is shown as a victim of a caste system, maybe they were written in a time when caste system was rampant in the society and people tried to reflect those into our epic and created this narrative. Is this narrative present in Mahabharata? No. In Mahabharata, Karna is not a victim of a caste system. Right?
He's a victim of his actions.
But maybe during the era, Shivaji Samant wrote Mrityunjay, or maybe Rashmirathi was written, this situation was a significant problem of the time. And even those retellings tell you about those times which so they are also, in terms of what you say, historical account as well. If somebody who wants to study those stories from that analytical angle, they can also figure out about those period and the social or the cultural issues or societal construct during those period. So this is something that is very Indian in our context. And also these epics, they go into the details. They are not stories per se, right? They are more than stories.
They are lessons of life.
So it's not only entertainment, correct? So if, let's say, if you, so somebody adopts Mahabharata to a TV serial, right? What chapters they omit? So like Mahabharata, if somebody's introduction to Mahabharata is through TV serial, they will probably not know about Shanti Parv. But what is Shanti Parv in Shanti Parv is the biggest chapter of Mahabharata, which is the conversation between Yudhishthira and Bhishma. And this conversation actually talks about how a king should behave, right? How the society should be constructed, because the war destroyed the society.
Also the taxation system they've talked about.
It is there in so basically you had to rebuild. Right? After the destruction, what comes? Rebuilding, right? So this rebuilding, how to rebuild a good kingdom with the good king at the center of it, is something that is defined in Shanti Parv. But that is not entertainment, honestly. Many people might find it boring. If your purpose of exploring this is just entertainment, you would not find this chapter very appealing. And that is why when somebody adopts it for TV, they would omit this chapter. Like two people sitting and talking, correct? How long they can keep talking? So there is not much action happening there, correct? So that is why it is more important to go to the stories, go to the original source and get those learnings also. Because most of the time, the retellings, the re-retellings that happen, they omit those learnings, those lessons. And sometimes these stories can get passed on through generational retellings. Because if you look at it, most of the people in India believe that they know Mahabharata. But almost all of those people have not read Mahabharata ever, right? But in their mind, they believe they know.
They picked it up from here and there.
It's passed on through generational, right? It's in the memory of exists somewhere, and you say, okay, if it is Mahabharata, I know some bits of it.
Like a civilizational memory is what the word you are looking. Is that how you would describe it?
You can call it that.
Okay.
But the point is, they believe they know without knowing it. That also is dangerous, correct? Because then when you don't take, you think that you know the lessons. Misinformation, right? So it's very easy to create misinformation in this kind of environment.
Right.
Because nobody is going to take the effort to read the original text, and then if somebody picks up these nuts and bolts and creates something which looks fairly relatable, you would probably find it accurate and you'll start believing in it, right?
Right.
So in this environment, it's very easy to spread misinformation. And that is why also this becomes very important, something like Sutradhar. Somebody who is not only in the business of creating business, who is also interested in passing on the values and the lessons the way they were intended to. And not many people are doing this, right?
So what exactly is the meaning of Sutradhar?
So Sutradhar basically, so when you have a story, the story has multiple threads, multiple pieces, right? And some thread ties those pieces together. So for example, I don't know, you are not old enough to remember the Mahabharata of B.R. Chopra, but there used to be a character that मैं समय हूँ. And that Samay, then he will tell the story कि मैंने ये देखा. So that Samay you can call probably the Sutradhar of that story that was being told in Mahabharata.
He's the narrator.
Narrator can be somebody, it is close, but narrator is somebody who is not part of the story, right? A Sutradhar is tying the threads together. Sutradhar is somebody, so for example, Sri Krishna is probably the Sutradhar of Mahabharata story.
Correct.
So he is there, but he is also controlling these threads. So it's like जैसे कठपुतली वाला होता है ना.
समझ गया मैं.
That is more accurate to that.
Like a puppeteer. He's making the things happen and he's telling the story also.
Yeah. And
he's in it.
One of the reasons for Sutradhar is also that India as a country is also fragmented, right? There are many elements. So a story, so for example, in Maharashtra, we have Vittal. In Gujarat, we have Srinath ji. In Odisha, we have Jagannath ji. In South, we have Srinivas ji. But all of them are Sri Krishna. Correct? But somebody outside Odisha does not know much about Jagannath ji. Somebody outside Maharashtra does not know much about Vittal. So when I am telling them the story, I am also telling them that you are same but different.
So you have tied up all the
So you are tying these threads together. That is also Sutradhar name makes a lot of sense. Because the point is, there is a lot of unity, but there is a lot of divide also. So we are united as one country, but you often see that somebody says, Hindi imposition mat karo hamare upar, ya hamara region alag hai. Why such thoughts can spread? Ideally, it should be very difficult to spread such thoughts at a scale, right? Because we ourselves don't know how alike we are. Like a movie Kantara, which talks about a very local tradition in a very specific region of country. Correct? But everybody in the country related to it. How? That was a very specific ritual that is taken at the center of the movie.
And it happens nowhere else in these other states. But still people
I have never seen something like that in my life, right?
Correct.
But when we watch that, we resonated with it. So that's what I'm saying. We are same but different.
But why do you think we resonated with it?
Because at the center of it, see, there is a fundamental behind the story, right? The fundamental is the messaging. If you look at it, the relationship between the deity and the people, that is similar everywhere, right? In our case, the deities exist with us. The deities live with us, right? The deities are very much
part of us.
Part of us, right? We know how Sri Ram looked like. We know how Sri Krishna looked like. We know what he did. We know where he lived, right? We fought a generations-long battle to recover the place where we believe Sri Ram was born, right? That is the relationship between the deity and the devotee that is common across every place in this country. So once you have that at the center, at the core, it will resonate. Like even if I go outside, for example, we talk about Chekhov or Shakespeare, we say that their stories are timeless. Why these stories are timeless? Because the center of those stories is emotions. The center of those stories are not characters. Some story talks about jealousy, some story talks about love, some story talks about... So that is how it is. So these emotions are universal. The characters may change, but the emotions will remain. So if the center of the story is these emotions, like even in Mahabharata. So I keep telling people that Duryodhan is a personification of jealousy, greed. Right? That emotion is universal. Karna is a personification of ego. He was so full of ego, he wanted to prove himself better than Arjun that
Correct.
he did not care that the world destroys or burns around him. He had a sole focus that, okay, the world should remember me as the best
at the
archer.
best, yeah.
Correct. He did not care whether how many people will die because of it. So it's a cautionary tale of, it's telling people, and that is why I say that there is a reason Mahabharata is important, and there is a reason the way it is written. And this ties to the question that you asked, that is it what has made us survive, or has it played any role in it? If you read Mahabharata is a very interesting book, which in the beginning itself tells you who is the hero of the book, who is the villain of the book.
Why?
Because it wants you to see the story and interpret in the story with this thought in mind. Because it is not just an entertainment story. It's not a novel. It is also telling you, okay, this is how good people behave, this is how bad people behave, and you should learn the lessons from it. So if you look at it, if you take the individual actions, there might be some actions which you would believe are not good things to do. Or so in short, it also tells you that in life, there might be situations when good people might do bad things, or bad people might do good things. But when you get into it, they may react to it differently. So when a Yudhishthir does a good thing, he regrets it. He feels guilt about it. He wants to correct it. He wants to apologize to people about it. Okay, because of me it has happened, I am so sad, I shouldn't have done that. He is trying to make it right. But when a Duryodhan does a bad thing, he doesn't feel guilty about it. He in fact is proud of his actions. See what I did. I snatched their kingdom. Correct? So this is the difference between a good person or a bad person. And this is the kind of lessons Vedavyas wanted you to learn. That is why in the beginning of the book, he says, this is the tree of dharma. This is the trunk of dharma. This is the flower of dharma. This is the tree of adharma. This is the trunk. This is the root. This is the flower. So you know that Dhritarashtra, Dushasan, Shakuni, Karn, Duryodhan, these are the bad people. They are conspiring. They are doing these actions. They might do some good things, but that doesn't make them good people. This is the Arjun, Yudhishthir, Shri Krishna, Nakul, Sahadev, Bhim. They are good people. They might do one or two bad things, but that doesn't mean they are bad people. So that is why how it defines the epic. But to another point, which that how misinformation is very easy in the kind of environment we are there today. Few days back, I encountered somebody asked a question, who is your hero, Arjun or Karn, on social media? And I responded that this was the very reason Vedavyas mentioned in the very beginning of the epic.
But who is the villain?
Who is the hero, who is the villain? So that you don't need to ask this question.
Sir, when I asked you why is it so vividly mentioned at the start of the Mahabharata that who is the hero, who's the villain, you said you said that this is a proper epic and not a novel. This is the problem with most people, that everybody thinks that this is mythology. Everybody says in Hindu mythology this happened, that happened. And if you Google Mahabharata now also, it will say Hindu mythological epic. What would you respond to someone who comes from any generation and says that, oh, this is mythology, why should I believe in it?
So, there are two aspects to this, honestly. I have faced this question personally multiple times. And mythology is just a word borrowed from a language which is not ours.
Yeah.
Right? And it's impractical to expect that language to understand our concept 100%. Correct? So, my belief is that the English language does not have a very appropriate word for something that like Mahabharata or Ramayana. And maybe the people found this word closest to it. And that is why they started associating with it. So for example, Bhagwan.
Yeah.
Many times you would see people using Lord. And I joke about it that Hanuman ji to Bhagwan hai, Lord to Mountbatten bhi the.
Huh.
Right? So the thing is that English language does not have an appropriate word for Bhagwan. What do you do? So the solution I use personally is that I use Bhagwan only. Even in writing English, I don't write Lord Hanuman, I write Bhagwan Hanuman or Bhagwan Parashuram, because I don't have an appropriate word in that language. The other point is, so just because somebody started using the word mythology, it happened that people started using the context of English context of mythology to our epics. Okay, so it is mythology, then it must be built around myths, right? Then, so it's cause and effect, right? We picked up the word mythology first and then associated with it here. But now, because it is associated, you are now questioning this part of the situation. And how, the problem with that is that while mythology is the closest English word available to us, these stories are not necessarily myths. That is what my belief is. Because when you get deeper into the details, when you read the detailed versions or unabridged versions of these epics, you yourself would realize that it's not like something fantastical or magical or that out of the world things are happening. It goes into the details or the explanation of everything that is happening. And you cannot do that something if it is imaginary, right? You can't get into the details of, for example, people talk about Pushpak Viman, or if there was that, if there were nothing that the people did not have enough thought about flying objects, they would not be able to get into that much detail of it. They would only touch it with the brief explanation and move on.
Which is not the case.
Which is not the case. So, for example, there was this instance in Mahabharata where Jayadratha's head is cut off and Arjun, fires arrows at it to make sure that it does not fall on the ground there, because Jayadratha's father had a boon that if Jayadratha's head, whoever is responsible for his head falling on the ground, that person's head would explode. So if Arjun allowed Jayadratha's head to fall on the ground, Arjun's head would have exploded. So everybody imagines something magical happened. Arjun might have fired some magical arrow and that would have taken Jayadratha's head away to the Kurukshetra jungle where Jayadratha's father was meditating. But no, the Mahabharata actually explains to you what happened in great detail. It tells you that Arjun kept firing arrows at this with the precision, and the kind of archer Arjun was, that precision is possible. And he made sure that the head these arrows carry that head to that distance. Like if you go to why we believe some of these things why it is very easy for belief is also the lack of visual identity or visual construction to this. So for example, when we imagine a chariot, we imagine the chariot that we have seen in B.R. Chopra's TV series. No, the chariots were not that easy. They were much complex devices, they were much bigger, and they used to carry a lot of arsenal in it for the warriors to fight the entire day. And there are descriptions, and that is why the role of charioteer was very important.
The Sarathi, you mean?
Sarathi, the charioteer was not a driver. But today everybody says, okay, Sarathi ka role unka demean kar diya. No, Sarathi role was very important. There were 4, sometimes 8, sometimes 16 horses on a chariot. Right? Each chariot has different description. Ghatotkacha had a very different chariot because Ghatotkacha was large. A small chariot would not be able to carry him. And on the day when Jayadratha was killed, it was a 40-mile long view. And in Mahabharata serial, when you will see that this chariot came, they both stood in front of each other, they both smiled at each other, then pulled their arrows and then started shooting their arrows at each other. No, that's not how simple it was. They were constantly moving, maneuvering, and then firing arrows at each other in that constant motion. Imagine the level of confusion that would be there. Imagine Arjun is moving alone in trying to penetrate, create a path for his rath through that view. And on both the sides, there are warriors, archers who are targeting him. So imagine the role Sri Krishna would have played. Imagine the role Arjun would have played in that journey. So during that epic, the 14th day, this is happening, war is happening, a lot of confusion is. Arjun is fighting deep in Kaurav territory and Yudhishthir is not able to see Arjun. And now he can't even, and the other sound cue is Arjun का जो धनुष है, गांडीव, उसकी आवाज बहुत specific है, बहुत दूर तक जाती है.
The string of the bow.
The string of the bow. When he pulls that string, there is a sound, and that sound travels a lot. But वो sound भी नहीं आ रही है युधिष्ठिर को, बहुत दूर अंदर है. Now Yudhishthir is worried. What happened to Arjun? So he sends Bhim, कि go and help Arjun. Bhim goes in. Now he's not able to hear anything still. He's still worried. He sends Satyaki. There is a description in Mahabharata which tells you Satyaki loaded so much on the chariot, weapons and arsenals, so that because now he has to go 40 miles deep in enemy territory, he doesn't have time to go back and refill. Right. So war में ऐसा नहीं था कि सुबह आ गए और वो फिर दिन भर लड़ते जा रहे हैं. There used to be this refilling of these arsenals. You asked one question, इतने arrows आते कहाँ से हैं? ऐसे आते हैं. वो it's all practical. They are all stocked in that way. They used to keep 10 bows also. अर्जुन के लिए आसान इसलिए था कि अर्जुन का bow unbreakable था. He didn't need to take 10 bows. That is what unfair advantage Arjun had. Arjun's bow had 1000 strings. तो अगर 1000 बार भी उसकी string टूट दी, उसको bow नहीं बदलना है. That is unfair advantage he had, which none other warriors had. But these are like, you had a better missile for that matter, right? That gives you an unfair advantage. Now what happens? It gives you a description that Satyaki stalked his thing and then he went in. Now when you stalk so much, your Rath will move slow.
Yeah.
Correct? It's all there. It takes all that into account. Correct? अगर fantastical, magical होता तो कुछ भी हो सकता है, right? You would not take all these small things into account. And now, at one point, Satyaki and Bhurishrava fight and all that thing happens. Then Sri Krishna picks his conch, signals his charioteer. Sri Krishna का भी chariot था. Sri Krishna के charioteer थे दारुक. तो श्री कृष्ण ने दारुक को बोल रखा था कि आज अर्जुन ऐसा युद्ध लड़ने वाला है जिसमें अर्जुन की जान भी जा सकती है. और अगर अर्जुन की जान गई, तो फिर मैं युद्ध लड़ूंगा और मैं इनको दिखाऊंगा युद्ध कैसे लड़ना है. And then he had put his chariot on standby. Ki okay, something happens, I will call you. So now Satyaki is injured. His chariot is broken. He gives a signal using his conch, using his shank to Daruk. Daruk understands the signal. He comes. So that means there were different notes or different messages that you could do using that conch. That is the importance of the conch in that battlefield. वो खाली वो युद्ध की शुरुआत अनाउंस करने के लिए नहीं है. It gives you, because that sound carries longer than...
It was a means of communication between your own people.
Between your own people. Exactly. What I was trying to explain is that if somebody is writing in this kind of detailing, then there has to be an element of truth involved in it. If it was something imaginary, that detail cannot be so accurate and so logical in its description. And if you go to the details, even the war chapters of Mahabharata are spread across like 700, 800 pages. You can't get into that much detail if it's just out of somebody's imagination. And that is why I believe that these are not just myths. There is certain degree of truth and certain element of history, itihas involved in it. That is why Mahabharata and Ramayana are in Hindi referred as itihas. The word in Hindi we use for them is itihas, not mythology. And that's where I personally believe them to be positioned at.
Okay. And we all often hear about a very powerful celestial weapon called the Brahmastra. I believe that it had some role in the Mahabharata, but I would love for you to elaborate on what role it exactly had. And is it the most superior weapon to all other celestial weapons?
So, Brahmastra name became very popular maybe because of the movie recently that came in. But there are various other weapons also that have been used in our epics. So if we, let's say, talk about Brahmastra, that one of the reasons it is also popular probably because Sri Ram used it to kill Ravan. So when we talk about Brahmastra, Brahmastra is categorized as one of the celestial weapons or divine weapons. And there were many such weapons. So even in this game, we have categorized around 20 such weapons which were used in Mahabharata, and each weapon represents some power or the other associated with it. So, for example, if you are talking about Varunastra, so Varunastra is a weapon which is associated with the god of water. So the typical property of Varunastra is that it can create rain, it can create hailstorms. So depending on how you intend to use it, maybe you can adjust the degree of usage, the way you see it being used. But you will always see that even in your TV serial or anywhere, you would see that the warrior would just hold the arrow and bow to his head, chant some mantra and fire the arrow. So that is, to be honest, slightly closer to how it is explained in the epic, because essentially what they were trying to do is they were using the regular arrows and invoking the power of that god in that arrow, so that it can create that kind of destruction that was desired.
You mean charging it or energizing it?
Energizing it, and there must have been more science to it, more into it, but we don't find that kind of a detail. But the detail what we find is that they were not easy to acquire, and it's not like that everybody could use these weapons. There had to be a process of learning and understanding. So there has to be some science, some thought behind it, and the more superior the weapon, the more difficult it was to acquire. So there is a famous episode in Mahabharata where Karna goes to Dronacharya and says, "आप अर्जुन को ब्रह्मास्त्र सिखा रहे हैं, मुझे भी ब्रह्मास्त्र सिखाइए." So Dronacharya says, "What do you want to use it for?" And the Karna says, "I want to use it to kill Arjun." So Dronacharya says, I can't teach you Brahmastra. And that is when he leaves Dronacharya and goes to Parashuram. But this also shows that everybody was not worthy of this knowledge also. In Spider-Man, there is this famous, with more power comes more responsibility. That is here also. That if you give to a power or ability to someone who is not worthy of it, they may not be able to use it in the right manner. So a knowledge
they may
of
let their ego take over and use it in that way.
It could be anything, right? So basically, a knowledge of a Brahmastra comes with a lot of responsibility. So we see it in later chapter when Ashwatthama fires Brahmashira. Right? Ashwatthama fires Brahmashira, Arjun counters it with his own Brahmashira, and then Vedavyas says, "Boss, you guys will destroy the world. So take your weapon back." Arjun is able to take his weapon back. Ashwatthama is unable to do so. And that is when he redirects it to Subhadra's womb, where Uttara's womb, where Parikshit was there. And that is when Sri Krishna takes his money and curses him for 3,000 years of suffering. But what it also shows is that when a person not worthy enough gets hold of it, it can cause this kind of destruction. So to summarize, there were some weapons with different abilities, different powers. We can probably call them a modern day equivalent missiles. And these weapons could be a way to launch these missiles, right? These bows. So that is how you can probably interpret it and imagine it. Other than that, if you want to get into the more details of it, there is actually a book called Dhanurved Samhita, which is written by Vasishtha Rishi. Vasishtha Rishi, everybody knows, he was the Kulguru of Sri Ram Dashrath Ji. In that, it actually goes into the details of this. What is the good length of a bow, how big or small a bow should be, how strong a string should be, right? What is the right stretch? All those details. Even it goes into the details of the various tips of the arrows. So when we see arrow, we always imagine that this is what an arrow looks like. And then when somebody says that Arjun cut off Karna's head with an arrow, you laugh at it. How is it possible? No, he used an arrow which was shaped like a moon. And those arrows were used for, so basically each type of arrow is used for a different purpose. For piercing, you will use something else. For cutting something, you will use something else. For a wood, you will use something else. And then these arrows also, because they were kept in a quiver, right? You are probably lifting them like this or maybe like this. There are multiple. You can keep it beside you on your chariot, or you can carry it
So
on
how
your
do you
back.
know which one is the?
That is why they had different tips also, the tails also. So their tails were not all same. There are various descriptions of tails also. There was the description of an eagle tail, eagle feather, or some other bird's feather, or a peacock feather. So you had different feathers on the tails.
There was a lot of
also.
science
There
behind
was
the
a lot of
development
science
of these.
behind these, and there was a lot of logic behind these. The tape, the material used for it is all detailed in this book also. If you want to know more, you can actually get this, a very small book, like 100 pages or something, and it details you, and it also then talks about the responsibilities, who the worthiness, when who can use them, who should not use them, and that kind of stuff. So there is much more to this than just magical powers. That's
Correct.
all I wanted to conclude with.
Okay. I have just one last question for you. I would like to take you back to the time where you had this small revelation for your idea, and you saw your daughter watching Peppa Pig. There's a similar distortion in our festivals also, where basically they think it comes naturally now that I am somehow more excited for Halloween than for Dasera. A lot of people look at Holi as an opportunity to do certain things that you wouldn't have done 10 years back. Why?
So this is something that I personally experience in my home also. So my daughter, who is now 7, she is very excited to celebrate Halloween. So we bought her this jack-o'-lantern shaped bag which she could carry around for trick or treating. And then my 2-year-old younger daughter found it, and she picked it up and she's like, Halloween. How did she know about Halloween? I never told her, right? My younger one doesn't even go to school. So it's not like that she picked up from schools or friends or anything. Because they are consuming a lot of content, because we parents are not finding enough time to educate them or to teach them about our festivals, our values, and they are picking it up from the sources that...
But can't they find the content on Dasera on where they are looking for? If they are finding content on Halloween, the argument would be that they can find the content on Dasera also.
Yes, but if you look at it, the content on Dashera is very small in quantity and bad in quality compared to the content available about Halloween. So when it comes to the natural selection, the kids always pick up the video which looks better or which entertains them better. Right. So that is one. The second is, most of these companies whose apps they are using, they are not Indian companies. Why would they promote Indian festivals? So even in their algorithm, those videos find better preference when they are doing the recommendations. Correct. And because we have left our children to learn on their own, this is what they are learning. Right? It's not the child's fault in any sense. It's the fault that we have not been able to tell them. Now, if you compare Dashera and Halloween, the way we used to celebrate Dashera as a kid, the nature of celebration would probably be very similar. Because in Dashera, we used to go to the entire village, we used to collect money from everyone to create the Ravan, or go to people, collect sweets from them. Even adults go to, like my Nana used to keep a pan set at the door, and he used to create put all these tables and chairs, and people would come in, he would offer pan to them, and they will chew the pan, spend some time talking, pair vair chua, ashirwad liya aur chale gaye. Which is very similar, which is probably a better way of celebrating Halloween. Rather than just collecting sweets and chocolates, you are also collecting probably some wisdom and some blessings of your elders, which is right culturally. And that is where I say that the cultural disconnect, the content that we are consuming is not culturally relatable to our society and culture. It is created for that society and culture. Right? So it is our responsibility and duty to explain these things to our kids, to make the other very important factor, which normally people miss, is the commercialization of these festivals. When a corporate interest aligns with something, that thing is automatically promoted, right? If some billions of dollars worth of organizations are putting their weight behind something, that is automatic that they will thrive while the others would not. Halloween is a very commercial festival, right? Why people celebrate Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day? And they, हिंदी में बोलते हैं नाक मुंह सिकोड़ना about Raksha Bandhan. What is different about Sisters Day and Raksha Bandhan? Raksha Bandhan is a much better way of celebrating Sisters Day, right? In our culture, we don't have Father's Day or Mother's Day because our father, mother live with us. You don't go to their place with the wine bottle on a Thanksgiving dinner. Our parents have dinner with us every day. So culturally, they are very unrelatable, to be honest. But because there is massive weight, like Archie's and Hallmark, when they came to India, they wanted to sell their greeting cards. But they had no greeting cards for Raksha Bandhan, Holi and Diwali. So they said, okay, let's make Father's Day, Valentine's Day popular. So that they can sell their cards. Why you have Secret Santa? So that you can buy those useless mugs, which are no relation to we are not a coffee drinking country anyways. But on every Secret Santa, all of you would have gotten some coffee mug or the other. If you go to any gifting site today, one of the popular gift promoted on Raksha Bandhan is a coffee mug that says world's best sister. Is that an Indian gift item? Does it have any cultural connect? But we do not have an Archie's and Hallmark equivalent in India who create gifting items for our festivals.
That itself is a big business idea.
That itself is a big business idea. Somebody should pick them up. But the point is that the moment the corporate interest starts getting aligned with Dussehra, Diwali, they will become massive festivals. Today we say Diwali ke din patake mat phodo, kutte डर जाएंगे. We say होली के दिन पानी मत वेस्ट करो, लोग नहाने को पानी, एक ही दिन के पानी बचा के हम साल भर नहा लेंगे. It's all, so basically when you have no problem cutting trees on Christmas, but you have problem with using some water balloons on Diwali. So you are making our festival duller and duller and making their festivals more, exciting and fun. बच्चा तो वही करेगा ना जो exciting and fun होगा. Last Diwali,
Adults be? Everyone is guilty.
Last Diwali, I came out in the evening with my daughter and my other two children कि पटाखे फोड़ते हैं, कुछ करते हैं. वहां पे पटाखे बैन है, पटाखे फोड़ ही नहीं सकते. मातम का माहौल कोई. मैंने बोला भाई नेक्स्ट दिवाली मैं कानपुर जा रहा हूँ अपने पेरेंट्स के घर पे, वहां पे मेरी खुली छत है, वहां जो मर्जी आई करूंगा, कोई नहीं रोक सकता मुझे. You have to make these festivals fun for the kids. Otherwise, they will forget these festivals.
Absolutely.
They will have no interest in celebrating these festivals. And these festivals are the link to this culture and this.
Yeah.
At every culture, what is a society? You living in your home, it's not a society. The society is when you go out on the street and you identify with the other people. How will you identify with the other people? You will not. The way to identify with these other people, why every festival has the element of outdoor activity. So that at least on those days you go out and interact with your neighbors. आप होली के दिन पानी से इसलिए खेलते हो क्योंकि आप घर पे पानी और कलर नहीं फैलाओगे. आपको बाहर जाना पड़ेगा और जब आप बाहर जाओगे आप 15 लोगों के साथ खेलोगे. Then you will know those 15 people.
Correct.
Right? आप पटाखा यहाँ पे नहीं फोड़ोगे. पटाखा फोड़ने के लिए आपको घर के बाहर जाना पड़ेगा. घर के बाहर जाओगे, 4 और लोग आपके साथ पटाखा, आप स्माइल करोगे उसकी तरफ देख के. राइट? कल को अगर आपको कोई चीज की जरूरत पड़ी, कोई नीड हुआ,
you can approach those. Absolutely.
This guy I met on Diwali, he smiled at me, maybe I can ask for a favor. If you kill these things, who will you go to tomorrow? Tell me any other way when you socially interact with your neighbors. None.
Right.
So that is why it is important for us to celebrate our festivals and promote our, and this is not only me saying, like, so this Diwali, I wrote an article for Dainik Jagran talking about the rituals of Diwali and the festival, because funny enough, if you see that Diwali is always associated with Sri Ram coming to Ayodhya, but none of the rituals that you perform have anything to do with that, right? So those rituals have a different significance and there are stories in various Puranic literature about those. In Puranas, there are descriptions of these festival celebrations and there is always an element of कि राजा खिलौने बंटवाता है, राजा आउटडोर स्पोर्ट्स करवाता है, राजा वहां जाके उनमें पार्टिसिपेट करता है. All those things are written and have been promoted, have been recommended. Why? so that people come together, have fun together. When you have fun together, you feel a bond. And that bond is important for us to remain a society.
It's about
Otherwise,
creating
we
harmony.
are individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
So that is why it is important to celebrate together. And what will you celebrate together? Our festivals.
Absolutely.
And that is why it is also important to create content around those so that kids feel excited about them. अभी वो आयरन मैन देखता है उसके इधर कुछ चमक रहा है, वो उड़ गया. अभी उनको दिखेगा कि उसने ऐसा तीर चलाया, बारिश हो गई. That is a superpower, right?
Absolutely.
You teach them right way, no? Tell them they will be excited. Our stories are better and more exciting. That I am 100% sure. They have passed the test of time, right? If some stories have lived through thousands of years, that means those stories are powerful. There is no doubt about the strength of the stories. The doubt is in our ability to tell them in the right manner. And that was one of the biggest reasons for Sutradhar to exist. That we should be able to tell these stories. We should be able to propagate this. We grew up in a culture where we were made to feel bad about our past. Right? We were told that तुम लोग तो जातिवाद करते थे, तुम लोग जिंदा जला देते थे. When you read through these,
there's so much of
distortion,
misinformation and distortion.
Misinformation created just to make you feel bad about it. And my whole motive was that my daughter should not feel bad about her existence. There is no reason for her to. Right? And so
we should actually
anybody else.
we should be proud of our epics and
Exactly.
learning from it, and we should also be able to be stocked up with information on it so that we can counter such narratives.
Correct.
Because right now we also succumb to it because we don't have the
don't have
information
enough-
or we
yes.
don't have the knowledge about it.
Correct. So tomorrow, if somebody comes and tells you some story, you believe it and you say, oh, so sad, it shouldn't have happened. But if you know the right thing, you can say, no, boss, you don't know.
Right. This is the truth.
Correct? This is the truth. So and the thing is, these stories are not only, there is a term called soft power that is thrown around very often. What is soft power? In my opinion, somebody in USA dancing on Chhaya Chhaya is not India's soft power. India's soft power, what is America's soft power? My daughter celebrating Halloween is America's soft power, right? Can I make a typical American kid fight with his father or her father that Papa, aaj hum Dashera manayenge, right? Let's celebrate Raksha Bandhan today. I have a sister. Correct? That is true soft power that we should aspire for. And
Wow.
What is soft power? That they understand our culture. Like today, everybody, if we do something bad, the whole world starts building narrative. India mein ye kharab hai, ye kaisa hai, ye aisa hai, primitive society. Because they don't understand our culture. It's not always because of
we
ill
can't
intent.
counter it because we ourselves have lost that
Exactly.
knowledge.
I'm saying it's not, these bricks are not thrown at us always because of ill intent. Some of them are maybe well intended, but they are thrown because they don't understand at all. Why you don't throw the same bricks at America when they do something wrong? Because you understand their culture, you have consumed their thousands of hours of content. Most of the kids in India talk in American accented English. Nowadays, the kids, when they are growing up, they talk in British accented English because they are learning from Peppa Pig. In China, half the Chinese kids are talking in British accent because they are watching Peppa Pig. This is the power of content and stories. We have to leverage that because we are a society which is rich with stories.
I just hope that the content that that we have consumed today with you, helps our audience, and people who are listening to this podcast understand the importance of our stories, understand the importance of our epics and the morality and the ethics and the way of life that they teach. And I think the game that you have built and the way you're doing it is just fabulous. I really, my eyes have opened up as to how much we don't know and how much of civilization and knowledge that we have lost. And thanks to people like you who are at the forefront in trying to bridge this gap. Games like this, puzzles like this, the kind of content that you're putting out on your apps, etc. I've seen some of them. And the blog of yours that I read about, why you want to be a storyteller and you're getting into the lost art of storytelling. I think that's just fabulous. And I would really like to thank you for coming here, taking the effort of coming all the way here and gifting us this beautiful game. Thank you so much for coming. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you for having me.
Is this
And
yeah?
it is important that what we are doing reaches to the largest group of people. And the blog that you talked about, one of the things I had mentioned was that most of the things that we do today, the language we use today, is inspired by these stories. We just don't know them. Right? So like we call Earth Prithvi. Why do we call Earth Prithvi? If you pick up Bhagavad Puran, you will know the answer. It has the story of King Prithu. Why we call the morning sunlight, the red light before sun in the
Arunima.
morning, Arunima. Because if you read Adi Parva of Mahabharata, you will know the story of Arun.
And there is a whole
charioteer of-
logical explanation to it, and there is a science behind it.
I don't know about the science part, but I'm saying it has explained the things in great details. And so not everything need to be scientific or related to science. Some of them are metaphors. Some of them are designed to tell us morals, tell us stories, tell us particular lesson. And if we are able to get those lessons, the purpose of these stories is solved. But you have to go to the right source for the right lesson. Otherwise, you might end up getting the wrong lesson. So I really thank you for having me here. And hopefully this will pick up and more people will play the game. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting now, for us to get started with this game. It looks
Please
lovely,
do.
and I'm going to look forward to, playing this game with my family and friends. So
you
thank
can
you very
go
much.
to our YouTube page also for the more content around the game.
Of course. I'm going to check that out. Thank you very much, and namaste. Thank you.